May the world become peaceful. May all men and women be gentle and honest. May all think of mutual welfare. May the minds of all be turned to the highest good. May there be devotion in the hearts of all to the Supreme Lord. Peace, peace, peace unto all. The topic of today's lecture is Nag Mahashay, Markers of a Great Soul. There are not that many truly great spiritual souls in the world, but when they appear, there's often widespread recognition of their greatness. Souls like Teresa of Avila, Julian of Norwich, and St. John of the Cross in the West, and Mirabai, Shankara, and Chaitanya in India, have all stood the test of time as being exceptional spiritual personages worthy of both our admiration and our study. In our own Vedanta tradition, there are a number of such souls, including both direct and householder disciples of Ramakrishna. Notable among the latter is Durga Charan Nag, who is often called Nag Mahashay or Nag Mahashaya. The word Mahashay comes from the Sanskrit Mahashay, meaning a person who possesses all greatness, or more familiarly, a great-souled one. The Ashtavakra Samhita describes signs of such a great soul. Quote, those desirous of worldly enjoyment and those desirous of liberation, both are found in this world. But rare indeed is the great-souled one who is not desirous of either enjoyment or liberation. The natural question then is, what made Nag a great soul? His life contains many markers, including his spiritual greatness, as well as entertaining stories of his eccentric behavior, such as eating leaf plates and a frog, but we'll get to those later. Using Nag Mahashay's life as a model, we'll identify those notable characteristics or markers common to spiritually great souls and see what we can learn from these markers in our own spiritual lives. Durga Charan Nag was born in 1846 in Deobog, a small village about 10 miles south of Dhaka in what is now Bangladesh. His father, Dindayal, was a pious Orthodox Hindu who worked for a salt export company in Calcutta. Nag's mother died when he was 8, though his father's sister, who had come to live with the family when she was widowed, quickly became a loving surrogate mother for Durga Charan and his younger sister Saradamani. We know little about his childhood, although it was said he was sweet-tongued, well-behaved, and modest. Ladies of the village doted on him because he was a beautiful child with a strong frame and flowing long hair. Unlike most village boys, he was not of a playful nature, although he did occasionally play games just to satisfy his friends. Even in play or fun, though, he would never tell a lie. In fact, his adherence to truth was so great that if any of his friends spoke a lie, the friendship between them was finished. Once some mischievous boys insisted that he lie so that they could win in a game, but Nag refused and they lost. The angry boys dragged him through a rice field until he was covered with cuts and bruises. In the evening, he painfully returned home, but without a complaint against anyone. Mahatma Gandhi said he tried to practice only 2 things in his life: nonviolence and truth. Gandhi said about truth, quote, the word satya, truth, is derived from sat, which means being. Nothing is or exists in reality except truth. That is why sat, or truth, is perhaps the most important name of God. In fact, it is more correct to say that truth is God than to say God is truth. Generally speaking of the observation of the law of truth is understood merely to mean that we must speak the truth. But we in the ashram should understand the word satya, or truth, in a much wider sense. There should be truth in thought, truth in speech, and truth in action. Nag Mahashay's devotion to truth as a boy needs to be seen in this greater context of unity in truth, in word and action. As we will see also later in his life, he upheld all of these principles. So, a life firmly established in truth, then, will be our first marker of a great soul. Nag went to village grade school through the 8th grade, but when he wanted to continue his schooling in Calcutta, his father was unable to afford the expense. Hungry for knowledge, Nag learned of schools in Dhaka, about 10 miles from his village. His aunt and friends all advised against this exploration, citing the 20-mile round trip. But Nag was undeterred. Taking only a little puffed rice, he walked to Dhaka and spent the whole day visiting schools. On his return, his aunt responded to his eagerness for schooling by promising that when he began, she would have his meals ready early in the morning. For 15 months, Nag walked the 20-mile round trip to Dhaka, regardless of weather. That was also the distance some of our grandparents claimed to have gone to school. But theirs was in the snow and uphill both directions. Despite the 15 months, he was absent a total of 2 days. Seeing his thirst for knowledge in spite of physical hardship, a compassionate teacher offered free room and board at his house, but Nag humbly declined, saying, "No, sir, I do not feel any difficulty in coming here." The astonished teacher remarked, "I know not what this boy will be in the future." Even in this short period of schooling, Nag mastered Bengali, and essays he wrote during the time were later published in a pamphlet called Advice to Boys, which was distributed to boys in his village. When he was 15, Nag's aunt arranged his marriage to an 11-year-old girl, but as was the Indian custom, this was more of a betrothal, so both remained with their parents. A few months later, Nag moved to Calcutta to stay with his father and to attend the Campbell Medical School. For unknown reasons, he studied only a year and a half, then left to study homeopathy under Dr. Bihari Lal Bahaduri, a well-known Calcutta physician. For 2 years, Nag carefully studied the lessons Dr. Bahaduri provided morning and evening. During this time, Nag's wife remained with her parents. If she happened to be there when Nag Mahashay returned to his village, it is said he would climb a tree and remain there all night so he would not be tempted. Though in his late teens, he felt that no one could realize God without chastity. Unfortunately, his young wife later died suddenly of dysentery. Nag was both saddened and relieved. He felt that Providence had freed him from worldly bondage, which pleased him. His father, however, felt he should be married again and gave instructions for selection of a suitable bride. Nag was able to buy a small box of homeopathic medicines, and with these he began to treat poor people in the area. He provided his services free of any cost and was dedicated to serving the sick and the poor, who had come to his house in great numbers. Always anxious to serve others, he sometimes even let his fathers take advantage of him when he was asked to do their shopping. As a homeopathic doctor, Nag Mahashay demonstrated an exceptional ability to prescribe the right medicine for the malady at hand. Dr. Bahaduri more than once commented on difficult cases which had seen good outcomes due to medications prescribed by Nag. Once when his mother-in-law came to Calcutta, she saw some of these wonderful results and said, "My son-in-law is verily Mahadeva, a god. Whatever medicine he gives, it is always effective." During his apprenticeship with Dr. Bahaduri, Nag met Suresh Chandra Datta. Though of opposite natures, The two were immediately attracted and became lifelong friends after their first meeting. Suresh was then a member of the Brahma Samaj, a religious and social reform movement. The Samaj believed in God without form and had no use for the gods and goddesses of traditional Hinduism. Nag, however, was an orthodox Hindu and felt that the gods and goddesses were not only true, but necessary for the ordinary person to attain Brahman. This difference of opinion was the source of many heated arguments between the two of them. When Suresh went to visit Nag in the evening, their talk would only be about religious subjects, though. Nag would say, "Well, sir, do you go so far as to say that the Vedas, the Puranas, the Tantras, and the mantras are all false?" To which Suresh would obstinately reply, "Keep aside, sir, your Shastras," meaning all scriptures. "I have no faith in them." Suresh found in Nag Mahashay a person of spotless character who observed all the prevailing customs and practices of traditional Hinduism. Religious from his boyhood, Nag carefully read Bengali translations of the Puranas, Tantras, and other scriptures. If he met a pundit, he would eagerly ask him to explain the true meaning. Nag took a daily bath in the Ganges and observed fasting on Ekadashi, the 11th day of the moon. At nightfall, he would go to a nearby cremation ground and stay there for hours, thinking, "Vanity, vanity, all are vanity. God alone is the truth. Unless he is realized, life is verily a burden. How shall I realize him? Who will show me the way?" Nag would ask these questions of the sadhakas, sannyasins, and other holy people that occasionally came to the burning ghat. But only an old Brahmin initiated in Tantra gained his respect and responded to Nag's desire to practice tantric sadhana by instructing him in japa and meditation. When Nag's father Dindayal learned of Nag's practices in the cremation ground, he quickly wrote to his son-in-law to select a bride for Nag as a way of banishing what he considered Nag's foolish ideas and to tie him to a worldly life. When Dindayal brought the marriage proposal to his son, it was met with an immediate refusal and began a furious debate between the two. "For you, I've been made a liar at this old age because I've given my word for your marriage to the bride's party." "Once you have me married, but that girl died, again are you going to place somebody's daughter in the jaws of death?" "Fate is determined by the divine dispenser. If you disobey me, your father, you will not succeed in any sphere of life." Nag felt he was between two fires, the curse of his father and the perceived loss of the realization of truth. As we will see, this was not truly the case, but Nag felt it was at the time. He importuned his father, "I beseech you, kindly do not put me into the bondage again. So long as you are living, I shall serve you heart and soul. I shall serve you 100 times more devotedly than your would-be daughter-in-law. Please save me." Nag's father saw this sorrowful look. He was proposing the marriage for his son's happiness and recognized that if it didn't achieve that end, it would be futile indeed. Dindayal agreed to cancel the marriage proposal. Then he soon realized that if Nag didn't marry, his lineage and shraddha for his ancestors would both end. He was terribly afflicted and wept in secret. When Nag returned home and found his father weeping, he was touched to the quick. "There is none to call my own in this world except my father. I have always been the cause of much sorrow to him. Away with religion. From this day forward, I shall obey my father at all cost. If my father gets consolation by getting me married, I must do that." His father was dumbfounded and only stared at his son with tears in his eyes. Coming to himself, he said, "My boy, you have saved my honor and thus my dharma also. Do what you like after you have married. I shall not say anything. I wholeheartedly bless you, my dear boy. May God fulfill your desires." While Dindayal made preparations for the marriage to Sharat Kamini and Deobhog, Nag was in agony over the results of his decision. He went without food, and the day before returning to their native village, Nag prayed to Mother Ganges, "O Mother, I have heard that you are the purifier of all sins. Therefore, if I be defiled by the dirt and dust of the world by becoming a householder, wash them off me." Following the marriage, father and son returned to Calcutta. Realizing he now had a family to support, for the first time, Nag started accepting fees from his patients for treatment. Still, he continued to spend much time helping the diseased and destitute in the neighborhood, providing not only free medicines, but money to buy food. Meeting a destitute person on the street, Nag would take him or her to his place to nurse them with the tenderest of care. He might even offer his own food to a hungry beggar, going without food himself. To his father, this seemed unusual and impractical behavior if his son wanted to protect his future. One day, on a patient visit, Nag found a poor man in a most deplorable condition. He carefully nursed him and came again that night. Realizing the man's leaky old house was no barrier to the cold, Nag spread his own thick woolen shawl over the man before leaving. The next morning, the patient expressed his deep gratitude, and Nag simply said that it was nothing extraordinary, that the man needed the shawl more than he did, and so he had left it. Back at home, Dindayal asked about the shawl and began to scold Nag severely for leaving it. Upset, they both went without food that day. In the morning, Dindayal bought another woolen shawl for his son. Nag's medical practice was so successful that he could have made a fortune if he was businesslike, but he never demanded fees from anyone and just took whatever was offered with cheerfulness. Suresh also observed that when Nag returned from his rounds, as he went to visit most of his patients, there would be often 4 or 5 persons waiting to get a loan from Nag, which he never refused. The money he did make was chiefly used in these loans or for giving charity, to the extent that some days there was nothing left for Nag's own meal. Putting others before self is an unfailing quality of a great soul. Nag so honored his father's wishes that he felt he gave up his life's highest aspiration. And he so honored the sick and the poor that he often gave up his own food and clothing. Vivekananda said, "Selfishness is the chief sin. Thinking of ourselves first. He who thinks, I will eat first, I will have more money than others, and I will possess everything. He who thinks, I will get to heaven before others, I will get mukti for others, is the selfish person. The unselfish one says, I will be last. I do not care to go to heaven. I will even go to hell if by doing so I can help my brothers. This unselfishness is the test of religion." End. Nag Mahashay never missed an opportunity to serve others, regardless of the cost to himself. There is no question he passed this test without even knowing it was a test. Admirable selfishness is a marker of a great soul. Nag's friend Suresh and some other Brahma followers would meet on the banks of the Ganges and spend time in prayers, meditation, and singing. When Nag joined them, he would sometimes dance, lose himself in ecstasy, and fall down. One day, he actually fell into the Ganges, and Suresh and a friend rescued him. Suresh said that at these times, signs of extremely strong love for God were obviously manifest in Nag. At about this time, a sadhu told him that regardless of strong faith, unless one practiced sadhana and meditation after being initiated by a guru, one could not get God vision. This made Nag very eager to be initiated, and he would spend hours on the banks of the Ganges, hoping that one of the sadhus who came to live there would take pity and initiate him. One day, while bathing, Nag saw to his surprise that his own family guru, Kailash Bhattacharya, was getting out of a boat. When he asked Kailash why he was there, The Guru replied, "I have come at the special command of the Divine Mother to initiate you." Following initiation, Nag passed many nights in japam and meditation, sometimes losing external consciousness. As this spiritual practice began to absorb his time, Nag's medical practice started to fall off, and his income dropped precipitously. His father particularly worried about his young daughter-in-law, Sharat Kamini, although there was never want for food or clothing. Sharat Kamini, however, knew that her husband was no ordinary man, and there's no ordinary relationship. Nag told his wife, "Love on the physical plane never lasts. Blessed is he who can love God, heart, and soul. Even a little attachment to the body endures for several births, so be not attached to this cage of flesh and bones. Take refuge in the Divine Mother and think of her alone. Thus your life here and hereafter will be ennobled." Sharat Kamani herself was like a nun, pure, dedicated, and self-effacing. She was quite happy to serve her husband and father-in-law, and sometime later, the many devotees of Nag Mahashay would come to their home. When Dindayal's health broke down, Nag finally convinced him to retire, so he returned to his native village. Sharat Kamini, too, went to care for him. Nag's friend Suresh continued to come by for their religious discussions, but even these could not satisfy Nag, who said, "Time is wasted in mere talks. Unless something is perceived directly, there is no use living." About this time, Suresh learned through the Brahma Samaj about a great saint living in Dakshineswar. This saint had great renunciation, was absorbed in God consciousness, and frequently went into bhava samadhi. Suresh wanted to visit this saint with Nag, but for some reason didn't mention it for 2 whole months. When Nag finally heard about the saint, who was indeed Ramakrishna, he wanted to go immediately, and he and Suresh left after their morning meal. After arriving at Dakshineswar mid-afternoon, they found a bearded gentleman sitting outside Ramakrishna's room, but they were told he had gone to Chandanagar and would come back some other day. As they were about to leave, they saw someone inside the room beckoning them to come in. Ramakrishna himself was seated on a small cot with his legs outstretched. Suresh made obeisance while Nag prostrated himself and tried to take the dust of Ramakrishna's feet, but they were withdrawn before they could be touched. Nag felt it was because he was not worthy and went to sit at the far end of the room with an aching heart. During conversation, Ramakrishna said, "You remain in this world like the pankal fish. There's nothing wrong in staying at home. The pankal fish lives in clay but is not soiled by it. Similarly, you remain at home, but be careful that dirt of samsara may not stain your mind." After this, Ramakrishna had them meditate a little in the Panchavati, the grove of 5 trees that Ramakrishna himself had planted. Then they went to all the temples in the Dakshineswar compound to bow down to the deities. When they departed, Ramakrishna said, "Come again. A relationship grows through frequent visits." On their second visit, a week later, Ramakrishna said he was glad to see them and that it was for them that he was there. He had Nag sit beside him, saying, "Have no fear, my child. You've attained a very exalted state." After another visit to the Panchavati for meditation, Ramakrishna had Nag prepare tobacco for him. When he was gone, Ramakrishna said to Suresh, "Did you notice? That man is like a blazing fire." Interestingly, later Swami Bodhananda, a disciple of Vivekananda, also said, "Nag Mahashay seemed like a blazing fire, always in a very high state and never faltering for a moment. Had the master not come, one might think Nag Mahashay to be the incarnation." The next visit, Nag came by himself. Nag was terrified seeing Ramakrishna go into bhava samadhi, but he was quickly relieved when Ramakrishna asked him in a normal tone for him to examine his legs, since Nag was a medical person. He touched Ramakrishna's feet, examined his legs, and found nothing unusual. When he was asked to examine further, he realized how the Guru satisfies the desires and difficulties of the disciple. He began crying, feeling the blessing of touching Ramakrishna's feet, since it had been denied him in the first visit. Nag was also convinced at this time that Ramakrishna was God incarnate. Asked about this later, he said, "After my going to Sri Ramakrishna for a few days, I came to know through his grace that Sri Ramakrishna was Narayana personified, and he was having his Leela in secret at Dakshineswar. No one can realize him unless blessed by him. Even austere penances for 1,000 years will be of no available to realize him if he does not show mercy." There's no question Nag received this mercy. Nag continued to visit Ramakrishna, who introduced him to Swami Vivekananda, saying, "He is really selfless. He does not feign it." To which Vivekananda replied, "Yes, when you say so, it cannot be otherwise." On another day, Nag heard Ramakrishna telling a devotee, "Well, it is very difficult for doctors, lawyers, and brokers to realize religious truths." He particularly mentioned doctors and said, "If the mind clings to the tiny drops of medicine, how can he conceive of the great universe?" Nag began to be disturbed in his meditation, with images of his patients appearing in his mind. This made him believe the advice was meant for him, and he quickly decided that he should not follow any profession which would be an obstacle to God realization. Returning home, he got his medicine box and medicine books and threw them into the Ganges. Then he took his customary bath and went home again, no longer a doctor. Apologies to those in the audience who are doctors, lawyers, or brokers. Nag had spent years studying and practicing medicine. The independent nature of a physician suited him very well, for he chafed at any manner of servitude, but he only required hearing Ramakrishna's assertion that realization was difficult for doctors, lawyers, and brokers, for Nag to give up medicine completely. Notable detachment is a marker of a great soul. When Dindayal learned of the demise of Nag's medical profession, he came to Calcutta as he was worried about Nag's future. Dindayal's employers, the brothers' pals, had always been devoted to him and considered him part of the family, so they were sympathetic to his request to hire Nag in his place. This was a good arrangement, as Nag didn't have much work to do and was able to continue visiting Dakshineswar and spend prolonged times in meditation. In fact, the more he visited Ramakrishna, the stronger he felt about renunciation of the world. As if to directly address these thoughts, when Nag entered Ramakrishna's room, he heard him say, "What harm is there in remaining a householder? Only keep the mind fixed on God. The life of a householder is like fighting from within the fortress." He further said to Nag, "Your life will set a true ideal for householders." In spite of these assurances, Nag's mind was greatly agitated. He began to pray to God day and night. At times he would roll in the dust. At other times he would unconsciously fall on thorny plants and be injured. Unless Suresh would forcibly feed him, he would not bother to eat. It was hard to tell when or where he would be, and it might be 2 a.m. when he returned home. He could not even do the little work his employers expected, so Ranjit, a poor friend, began to act as his stand-in to perform Nag's job. When Nag returned to his village for a short time, his wife was noticeably affected to see her husband in this state and understood that he had no desire whatsoever for a householder's life. Nag made it clear after dedicating himself to Ramakrishna that he simply couldn't do anything worldly for the family. An incident with a cow underscores this unusual situation. Nag's sister had a garden in which she'd grown a gourd plant. One day a neighbor tied a cow near the plant, but the rope was too short to allow the cow to reach it. Seeing the cow's repeated attempts to reach the plant, Nag was moved to untie the cow, telling it, "Mother, eat," which it did. Nag's father, Dindayal, watched all this from a distance, but it was too much for him to bear, and he rushed at Nag, saying, "You yourself do not earn anything for the family now. Now, instead of doing any good turn, how dare you cause such a loss to it? You've given up your medical profession. How you keep the wolf from the door?" Nag responded, "You need not be anxious on that score. The Lord will see to that, whatever it might be." To which Dindayal rejoined, "Oh, that I know quite well. You will have to roam naked and live on frogs." Without a word, Nag removed his loincloth, found a dead frog lying in the courtyard, and began eating it in front of his father. Obviously, it wasn't a vegetarian day. "Now I've fulfilled both of your commands. Please don't worry about my food and clothing any longer. Chant the name of the Lord, I beg you, and don't think about household affairs in your old age." Thinking Nag was now completely mad, Dindayal told his daughter-in-law from now on not to do anything against Nag's will. Nag's austerity defies description. A verse in the Bhagavata says, "He who has controlled the tongue has controlled everything." Nag was especially careful about controlling his palate so that attention to food would not divert his mind from God. He called it a craving for the pleasure of the tongue. He never took any sort of refreshment and would not touch sweets if not offered to God. He never used any salt or sugar and often abstained from food or water for days. He gave up using shirts and shoes and wore only a plain cloth and shawl. Seeing Nag's austerity and self-effacement, Girish Ghosh said, "Nag Mahashay has knocked on the head of his rascal ego so severely that it cannot raise it to it anymore." Strict self-control is a marker of a great soul. While he remained in the village, Nag gave no occasion for his father to think of family or worldly matters. He read religious books to him and rebuked those who came to gossip and tell stories. Back in Calcutta, Suresh asked Nag about his father, who sadly replied, "If a man has even once tasted the fruits of this poison tree of the world, he is doomed forever. There is no escape without the grace of Mahamaya." This moved him to sob and cry out in compassion for his father. "Glory to Sri Ramakrishna, glory to Sri Ramakrishna. Extend your grace, O Lord, to my father." He lamented to Suresh that his father would still think of worldly things, though he was old and infirm and unable to go out. Visiting Ramakrishna after his return to Calcutta, Ramakrishna again noticed Nag's strong spirit of renunciation and told him, "Remain in your own home. Somehow or other, the family will get its bare maintenance." How can one remain in the home? How can one remain unmoved even at the sight of others' suffering and troubles? Well, I tell you, take my word, nothing can taint you if you remain in your home. People will wonder to see your life. How should I pass my days as a householder? You have not to do anything. Always be in the company of the pious. How am I to distinguish a pious person unintelligent as I am? Oh no, you have not to search for them. You remain in your own house, and the truly pious will come of their own accord to you. And indeed, as Ramakrishna said, later they did come. As he continued his arduous spiritual practice, Nag thought that as long as he had to work for the maintenance of the family, he would never be able to attain peace. His plan was to turn over his dispatch work to his friend Ranjit so he could devote his full attention to God. When he suggested this to employers, they asked how he would provide necessities. Nag replied, what Ranjit would kindly give me in charity. With that I shall try somehow to make ends meet. The brothers Pals understood that Nag couldn't maintain a job any longer, so they felt they must provide some means of sustaining the family. Sending for Ranjit, they arranged that half the share of his business profits should be given to Nag. Ranjit, however, knew Nag's nature and realized if the whole amount was given to Nag, it might all be spent. So it was arranged that after Nag's basic expenses, Nag would send the remainder to Dindayal. Hearing of this arrangement, Ramakrishna exclaimed with joy, "Very good, very good." So for the rest of his life, Nag's expenses were met through this generous arrangement by the brothers Pals. Ramakrishna's grace writ large. Freed of any concern for worldly maintenance, Nag spent more time than ever in spiritual practices and frequently visited Ramakrishna. Up to this time, Nag had never gone to see Ramakrishna on Sundays or holidays because he felt it was unworthy to talk to the people of stature that came on those occasions. As a result, he is never mentioned in the Gospel of Ramakrishna. But visiting more frequently, Nag now met some of these people. On one such day, Girish Ghosh, the famous Bengali dramatist and a favorite disciple of Ramakrishna, entered Ramakrishna's room with two friends. In the corner, they saw a man, shabby and emaciated, but with bright, shining eyes, sitting in great humility with folded hands. Ramakrishna introduced Nag to Girish, and from that moment on, they were fast friends with great respect for each other. It was Girish who later said with characteristic humor that Mahamaya, the great enchantress, was in trouble trying to bind Vivekananda and Nag Mahashay. Quote, "As she tried to trap Vivekananda, he became bigger and bigger, and at last he became so big that all her fetters were too small and she had to let him go. And when she attempted to trap Nag Mahashay, he began to make himself smaller and smaller until he had at last reduced himself to such a degree that he could easily slip through the holes of her net." End. Nag was the very emblem of humility, and this shone through every part of his body. Due to a chronic headache, he gave up bathing for the last 20 years of his life, and this gave him a dry, rugged appearance. The appearance of humility was also accentuated by his severe spiritual practices. While walking on public roads, he would not go ahead of anyone, regardless of how lowly they were, but would step aside, then follow humbly. He would not even step on another's shadow, nor would he sit on a bed occupied by another. But in whatever form or dress the Lord might choose to appear, Nag was always ready to provide endless service to others and considered himself blessed to do so. Deep humility is a marker of a great soul. It had been 4 years since Nag first met Ramakrishna. The master, as he was known by his devotees, was now lying ill with throat cancer in the garden at Kashipur. This was a most difficult time for Nag. He said, "What to speak of seeing his sufferings? Even the very thought of them was enough to break my heart. Oh, I could not bear the sight of the master's sufferings. When I found out that he, out of his own will, allowed the disease to remain in his body, and I could not alleviate his sufferings, I made up my mind not to go near him. Only very rarely I used to go and see him." When Nag's friend Suresh visited Ramakrishna after a trip away, Ramakrishna said, "Where is that doctor? I hear he knows medicine. Please ask him to come here once." Suresh duly informed Nag, who obeyed the master's command and came into Kashipur. "Oh, you have come, that's good. The doctors and Kaviraja's other physicians have given up hope of curing the disease. Do you know anything to cure me?" Nag thought for a moment, then resolved to take the fatal disease into his own body from the master's through sheer willpower. In a burst of excitement, he cried out, "Yes, yes, I do know. Through your grace, I will do it right now." and quickly moved toward Ramakrishna. The master, however, understood Nag's thinking and pushed him back, saying, "Yes, I know you have that power to cure the disease." The last time Nag went to see Ramakrishna was only a few days before the master's passing. Entering the room, he heard the master saying, "Can amalaki," it's a tropical fruit which is said to be good for your throat, "be had now? My taste has become so flat for everything. I think it can be removed if I could chew one amalaki." A devotee responded that amalaki was out of season, so none were available. Nag, however, felt that if the word amalaki had come from the master's holy lips, that it had to be available somewhere. Without telling anyone, he went away to search. For 2 days, he wandered constantly from garden to garden, finding nothing but barren trees. On the 3rd day, he appeared before Ramakrishna with one amalaki fruit in hand. The master was overjoyed like a little child. "Ah, what a beautiful amalaki this is! How could you get it at this time of the season?" He then asked Ramakrishnananda to prepare food for Nag, who sat near the master, and began to fan him. When the food was ready, Ramakrishna asked Nag to go eat, so he sat down, but didn't touch the food. Everyone asked him to eat, but he remained silent. This was Ekadashi, and Nag was fasting, although he had mentally resolved that if Ramakrishna gave him prasad, that he would break his fast and eat. Ramakrishnananda told Ramakrishna the situation, and the master asked that Nag's food be brought to him. He took just a little from each of the dishes, touching them with his tongue, then said to give the food to Nag so that he would eat. Ramakrishnananda brought the plate and placed it before Nag. "Prasadam, prasadam, holy prasadam," Nag exclaimed, bowing to the food, then began to eat. While eating, in his exuberance for the prasad, he ate the leaf plate as well. Good thing they didn't use regular plates. Ramakrishnananda remarked that religious fervor of a high order was obviously visible within Nag that day. Following this incident, Ramakrishna's devotees were careful never to serve Nag on prasad on leaves. And if this did happen by accident, they attended very carefully so they might snatch away the leaf plate when he had finished the meal. Stones and pits were also carefully removed from any fruit they gave Nag, lest he eat them also. Devotion beyond measure is a marker of a great soul. After Ramakrishna's passing, Balaram Bose asked Nag to live at Puri. The brothers' pals suggested he live at Navadip. In both cases, all expenses would be borne. But Nag said, "The master asked me to remain at home. I have not the least power to deviate an inch from his order." So holding Ramakrishna's words above all else, Nag went back to his native village. Again in his own house, Nag began to serve his aging father with careful affection. Dindayal had been stricken by his years and needed nursing, which Nag provided with great care. One day, Dindayal expressed the regret that many people were worshiping the Divine Mother, but they had not been so fortunate. Durgacharan has given up earning money. Hearing this, Nag began to arrange yearly celebrations of Durga Puja, Kali Puja, and Jagadatri Puja, and other festivals of the Divine Mother, in order to satisfy his father. Nag gave his father no chance to be diverted by worldly activities, as he was always reading scriptures to him. Due to this diligent effort by Nag, he later told Suresh on a visit to Calcutta that his father was quite changed. Thoughts of the world no longer overcame him anymore, and he spent his whole time thinking and talking only about the Lord. When Swami Vivekananda returned from the West after his first visit, Sarat Chandra Chakrabarti, a great devotee of Nag, who also wrote the biography that many of these stories come from, went to see Vivekananda. Hearing that Chakrabarti was a regular visitor of Nag's, Vivekananda said, "Our life is passed vainly in the search after truth. Only he among us is the true blessed son of our master." He then expressed a desire to see Nag in his village and asked Chakrabarti to write accordingly. Nag, however, hearing that Vivekananda had returned, went to Calcutta to see him. Arriving at Bellarmine, he fell prostrate before Vivekananda, and finding his health was not good, expressed his anxiety by saying, "Thakur used to say that you were the chest of gold muhurs." Muhurs are gold Indian coins. "The preservation of your health will save the world from misery. The world hangs on you." Following a long conversation, Vivekananda asked Nag to live in the monastery. "What can I do? How can I disregard our master's wish? Thakur gave me the command to live at home." Vivekananda then ordered the monastery scriptural class be canceled in honor of Nag's visit, and had all the brahmacharyans and sannyasins come sit with him. Addressing the group, he said, quote, "Only by seeing Nag Mahashay can one understand to what state in the spiritual world a person can attain through the grace of the Lord. In self-control and renunciation, he is by far our superior." End. That evening, Nag followed Swamiji as he walked the monastery grounds. Taking leave before he took the ferry, Nag prostrated before Swamiji. "Hail Shiva Shankara! Hail Shiva Shankara!" This was because Nag said Vivekananda was an incarnation of Shiva. Swami raised him from the ground and said, "Please do come and bless us with your holy presence every now and then." Vivekananda later wrote in a letter, "I have traveled many places in the world, but nowhere have I come across such a great soul as Nag Mahashay." End. Nag was never moved by worldly difficulties, but as calm and serene as he was, he would lose all patience if anyone spoke badly of the master. Once a gentleman of Narayanganj told all sorts of lies about Ramakrishna. Nag politely asked him to keep from doing so, but the more he requested, the more unrestrained the gentleman was in his lies. Finally, Nag told him again, "Please do not tell lies against the master." But the man persisted, which excited Nag, who told him, "Get out of my house, or else you will have to suffer for it." Even this did not restrain the man, who kept going on, causing Nag to lose all control. He became furious and started beating the man's back with shoes, saying, "Get out from this place at once, you rascal. How dare you speak ill here of my master?" It so happened that gentleman was a person of stature and influence in Deobog. After thus being beaten, he threatened Nag while leaving. "Well, I shall see what kind of sadhu you are. You will soon taste the bitter retribution." Nag paid no attention to this, saying, "O Lord, why do you bring such persons who speak ill of you? Fie on this householder's life." In a short time, Nag was himself again. A few days later, the gentleman came to beg Nag's pardon. Nag thought no more of it, received him kindly, and cheered him up. When Nag next went to Calcutta, Girish Ghosh heard of this incident and asked, perplexed, "You don't wear shoes. Where did you get the shoes to beat him with?" Nag replied, "Why, I beat him with his own shoes." Then he bowed down before Girish, saying, "Glory to Sri Ramakrishna, glory to our master." Girish commented, "Nag Mahashay is verily a hooded Naga," which is a serpent deity often represented as a big cobra. Earnest devotees and seekers of God came to see Nag Mahashay from all parts of the country. Nag told his wife, "Sri Ramakrishna's words of benediction have now been fulfilled. Those who had come here must be true seekers of God. So I was told by the Master. Serve them with all care and devotion, and God will bless you." Nog didn't allow any visitors to leave without having taken some light refreshments. And for those who came from a distance, he arranged lodging. One of the 4 rooms in his house was for guests who could stay as long as they liked. Everyone in the family maintained this zeal in receiving guests, following the injunction in the Taittiriya Upanishad, Atiti Devo Bhava, be the one for whom the guest is God. Nog would say, this is all play of the Lord. He appeared as an individual in human form, and now it is he that comes again to grace me in different forms. In this way, Nog could see God in all beings and served all guests as Narayanas, or gods. One day, Nog was suffering from acute colic, which plagued him throughout his life. The pain was so bad it had made him lose consciousness at times. Completely unannounced, 8 or 10 guests arrived at his door. There wasn't a grain of rice in the house. Nog hastened to the market in spite of his ill health. Never allowing anyone to do anything for him, he carried the bag of rice on his shoulder, but on his return, the pain became so bad that he collapsed on the roadside. Not caring for himself, he was lamenting, "Oh Lord, what fate is this? Why has this befallen me today? Narayanas have come to my house, and it is getting late to serve them with food. Wretched indeed is this cage of flesh and bone that is standing in my way of serving the Lord today." After a while, the pain subsided enough so Nog could return home with the rice. He bowed down before the guests and humbly begged their pardon for being so late in serving them. In spite of his innate wisdom and exceptional devotion, Nog never took the attitude of a teacher or a guru. He steadfastly refused to give initiation to any disciple, though many times he was asked. His humble, guileless, and gentle behavior won the hearts of all. Everyone loved Nog Mahashay. No one who saw him could ever forget or fail to be impressed by his saintly character. Though he didn't initiate, he did keep a watchful and affectionate eye on his innumerable devotees, though, praying for their well-being and progress along the path of God realization. Nog's behavior with the shoes was exceptionally unusual, for Nog was the epitome of ahimsa, or nonviolence. Nog's life followed to the letter the maxim, non-injury is the highest virtue. At nearby Narayanganj, there was a large jute mill, and at one time some of its European officers came to Deobog to hunt game birds. Hearing of their guns, Nog came running to them and asked with folded hands that they refrain from such inhuman behavior. They could not understand his words, however, and proceeded to load their guns to begin their hunting. This made Nog indignant, who said in a furious tone, "Do no more such cruelty." But the officers took him to be mad and proceeded. Nog suddenly jumped on them and quickly took hold of all of their guns, as if the strength of 100 lions had possessed his feeble frame. Try as they might, the hunters could not extract their guns. Nog took them home with him, put them in a safe place, and washed his hands carefully after touching the deadly weapons. The officers returned to Narayanganj, where they intended to file a lawsuit against Nog in the meantime. Nog had sent the guns back through a Bengali officer of the jute mill. In conversation, this officer mentioned Nog's saintly character and sincerity of purpose, which fostered a sense of respect on the part of the officers, who abandoned thoughts of taking Nog to court. They also never came back to Deobog for hunting. The suffering of any creature was too much for Nog to bear. A large number of fish would settle in the pond near Nog's house during the annual floods. One day a fisherman caught some of them, and according to the custom, came to give a share to Nog as the adjacent property owner. Seeing the fish struggling in the basket, Nog was greatly affected and purchased the whole lot at the price asked by the fisherman. He then turned them loose in the pond. On another day, another fisherman caught fish from a pond close to Nog's home and came to sell them to Nog. This time also, Nog purchased all the fish and let them go in his pond. The fisherman was astounded at this strange behavior, and as soon as he got his money in his basket, he ran away from this madman for good. Even a dangerous snake was not to be touched in Nag's home. The sight of a large cobra in the courtyard alarmed the household and caused even Shart Kamini to suggest that it be killed. Nag objected, "It is not the snake of the forest that does any harm, but it is the snake that is in the mind that really kills a person." Then he addressed the cobra with folded palms. "You are the visible manifestation of the goddess Mahashay. Your home is the forest. May it please you to leave my humble cottage and go to your own dwelling." And strangely enough, the snake followed him, with hood bent down, as he showed it the way back to the jungle. Nag often used to say, quote, "The outside world is the projection of your own mind. If you do not harm anyone in the world, no one will harm you. It is just like looking at the mirror. The reflection of the mirror shows exactly the faces you make to it." End. I had the good fortune of knowing someone who resembled Nag Mahashay in this regard. His name was Norman Schrager, and he was a devotee of Swami Sat Prakashananda, who lived in Edinburgh, Texas, and would visit here once a year. He owned a store that sold Western boots and apparel and lived behind the store in a small stone block building. Once when I visited him, I commented that a window was partly open and the screen up in a back room that faced the alley. Norman acknowledged that and said that the creatures needed to have a place to stay too, and that's why I left the screen open. I later found evidence of mice in the room, but decided not to look any further, not wanting to know what other Texas creatures were also sharing Norman's home. It was Nag's perception that God resides in the heart of all creatures. If he was asked why he remained with folded palms most of the time, he reflected that he saw his chosen deity everywhere and in every living being. No one ever saw Nag carelessly treat even the smallest of insects. If ants were to climb onto his body, he would carefully remove them to a safe place. At times he was so caught in this sentiment that he would not walk for fear he would step on some small being. Once a devotee of Nag's found that white ants had eaten into the posts that supported the eastern side of the veranda. He hit the post and the ants fell down, helpless. "Alas, what have you done?" cried Nag, moved with pity. "Poor creatures, they found a peaceful abode here for a long time. It is very cruel of you to molest them." His eyes were filled with tears as he said this, and the devotee was stricken with remorse. Nag then approached the ants, saying, "Make yourselves comfortable here again. This time you need fear no harm." The ants established themselves once more, and in time the post gave way, but Nag never allowed anyone to disturb them. Nonviolence to all living beings is a marker of a great soul. In 1899, 3 years after his father passed away, Nag was seriously ill with colic and dysentery. Chakrabarti received a wire from Shart Kamini of this serious illness. A good writer, Chakrabarti was scheduled to read a paper on the religion of the Vedas at a Ramakrishna meeting the next day. Hearing of this apparent dilemma, Swami Adbhutananda told him, quote, "You will have many occasions in your life to deliver lectures on the Vedas, and people will always be there to hear your lectures. But if Nag Mahashay passes away, you lose the opportunity in your life to see a living Veda." Chakrabarti listened, hastened to Deobhog, and tended to Nag the last 13 days of his life. Nag never mentioned his suffering to anyone, though it must have been tremendous. He told his wife, "My prarabdha," meaning karma from other lives, "has almost come to an end. Only a little more has to be worked out." Day by day, the illness made Nag weaker and weaker. He took very little food by day, and at night he fasted, leaving him almost a skeleton. He could not be persuaded to take any medicine. Addressing his wife's anxiety, he said, "Why do you get anxious for this body, a despicable cage of flesh and bones?" Chakrabarti read from the Gita, the Bhagavatam, and the Upanishads, and sometimes sang bhajans to the Divine Mother. These songs often sent Nag into deep samadhi for long periods of time. Returning to normal consciousness, he would cry out, "Mother, Mother," like a baby waking from deep slumber. Even during this illness, Nag would say to Chakrabarti, "How God is gracious and kind. It is all grace of the Lord." Seeing Nag's suffering, Chakrabarti thought, but did not say. God is not gracious, but cruel. Reading his mind, Nag said, "Young man, don't even for a moment be doubtful about the boundless mercy of God. What good to the world can be expected of this body? See, it is now bedridden. I cannot even serve the Narayana in you with it now. And so Ramakrishna, out of his boundless mercy, is making this despicable body of mine disintegrate into the 5 elements." Then more feebly, "Let the body take care of itself. Let miseries and sufferings take care of themselves, O my mind. You always remain aloof from them and cling to the blissful nature of the self." 3 days before he passed away, Nag asked Chakrabarti to consult the almanac and find an auspicious day for departure. Chakrabarti didn't understand Nag was talking about final departure and innocently said, "The 13th of Paush," which is the 9th month of the Bengali calendar overlapping our December and January. "After 10 o'clock in the morning is an auspicious time for starting." He was dumbfounded when Nag then replied, "If you so permit, I will finally start on that day." Mortified, Chakrabarti went to Sharat Kamini and related everything. She said, "My boy, there is no use crying anymore. He will not live any longer. Let God's will be done. Let Ramakrishna's will be done." 2 days prior to his passing, Chakrabarti, Sharat Kamini, and another devotee were sitting by Nag's bedside. His eyes were closed, but suddenly he opened them and said, "Sri Ramakrishna has come here to show me the places of pilgrimage." Because Ramakrishna had asked him to stay at home, Nag had never gone to any of the pilgrimages so revered by devout Hindus. Looking directly at Chakrabarti, he asked him to name the holy places and he would visit them. As Chakrabarti mentioned the places one by one, Hardwar, Prayag, Varanasi, Puri, Nag immediately had a vision of it and related in great detail what he saw. At Hardwar, he said, "There comes Mother Ganga down from the Himalayas with a murmuring sound. Ah, what a beautiful bathing god it is. Wait for a moment, please. I have not bathed for these last 20 years. Let me take a plunge in the sacred waters and make my life blessed." When he came back to normal consciousness following samadhi, it seemed as if he had really just finished his bath. On 8 a.m. of the last day, Nag was repeatedly falling into ecstatic states. Chakrabarti placed a picture of Ramakrishna before Nag's eyes. Nag saluted it with folded palms and uttered his last words, "Grace, grace, grace out of your own boundless mercy." At 5 minutes after 10 a.m., he was gone. Nag was indeed a great souled one, neither truly householder or monastic. He was an exemplar and inspiration for all of those who had the privilege of coming in contact with his holy life. We observe in his life the great soul markers of truth, unselfishness, detachment, self-control, humility, devotion, and nonviolence. Most exceptionally, Nag carried each of these ideals to levels unimaginable, even for monastics. We may not be able to cultivate these markers to the same extent as a great soul like Nag Mahashay, but we can nevertheless follow and be inspired them to the extent we are able. Even if we sing it in bits and pieces, we can still sing the same song as the great souls. That is my prayer for all of us today. May we all think of holy things and so become holy. May we all dwell on saintly lives and so become saintly. May the images of saintliness inspire us, throw light upon our path, and transform us. May the ever-gracious God bless us that we may reach ever higher towards the divine. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Next Sunday, the 29th, Swami Chaitananda is back giving a lecture. This is his annual talk on Buddha and his teachings, part 35. So he will be back at the temple, which is great. I also need to remind you about our first ever full spiritual retreat day on April 4th. It's going to be held at the Mahatma Gandhi Center, and it includes lunch and dinner, and you can find details about it on our website, VedantaSTL.org, along with a link that you can register if you want to come. We're trying to ask people to register by Thursday so that we have the numbers that we need for the food caterers. And finally, I will be in the library for further discussion if you want. And we will also have the big screen here for Swami Chaitananda's Zoom Q&A.